The cutting December wind turned every corner of Chicago into a frozen blade, but Marcus Thompson had learned to embrace the cold like an old acquaintance. His trembling hands held a soaked piece of cardboard that read, "Afghanistan Veteran, any help is welcome," words that had become his only companion over the past 3 weeks living beneath the Roosevelt Street bridge. Passersby hurried along, some tossing coins without even glancing at his face, others averting their eyes as if his presence were a disturbing reminder that fate can be cruel even to those who served their country. But Marcus knew tonight would be different. There was something in the air that made his heart beat faster, a feeling he hadn't had since his days on the battlefield. The scar that slashed across his left cheek, a reminder of an explosion in Kandahar, throbbed whenever the weather changed, and tonight it pulsed like a silent alarm. Marcus adjusted the worn military jacket, the only remaining possession from his days of glory when he was Sergeant Thompson, respected by his men and feared by his enemies. The medals that once gleamed on his chest now lay locked away in some Veterans Affairs vault, along with his hopes for a normal life after service. He closed his eyes and tried to silence the memories that haunted him like ghosts, but the deafening noise of traffic on the avenue kept him anchored in the cruel present. 3 years had passed since Marcus returned from war. 3 years since he realized there was no place for him in the world he helped protect. Post-traumatic stress had destroyed his marriage, cost him his job and eventually his home, turning a war hero into just another faceless statistic among the homeless veterans. He watched families hurry down the sidewalk, children clutching their parents' hands, and felt a hollowness in his chest no amount of alcohol could fill. But tonight was different. There was a strange energy in the air, something that triggered his soldier's instinct into high alert, as if the universe were about to test his courage one more time. The distant church bell chimed 9 when Marcus noticed a small shadow moving among the trees in the park across the street. His trained eyes locked on the frail figure, staggering as if lost, and his heart raced as he realized it was a child, completely alone in the freezing night. He rose slowly, every muscle in his body protesting against the cold, but something inside him, perhaps the protective instinct that made him a good soldier, pushed him to act. The child stumbled and fell to the ground, and Marcus knew in that instant that his life was about to change forever, though he could not yet imagine how deeply this encounter would shake not only his own existence, but uncover secrets no one was prepared to face. The sound of Marcus's steps echoed on the wet cobblestones as he approached the small figure curled up on the ground, and then he saw the most angelic face he had ever witnessed. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, with messy golden hair and blue eyes that sparkled like stars even through her tears, looked up at him with a mix of fear and hope that hardened and softened his soldier's heart at the same time. Her clothes were dirty and torn, her small shoes soaked by the light rain that had begun to fall, and Marcus could hear her stomach growling even from a distance. He stopped a few feet away, raising his hands in peace, knowing his rough appearance might terrify the already frightened child even more. "Hey, little one, are you okay?" Marcus asked in the gentlest voice he could find, slowly kneeling to her eye level. The girl studied him with curiosity, her lips trembling not just from the cold, but from something deeper, a sadness no child should ever carry. "I'm Marcus, and you don't have to be afraid of me. I know I look scary, but I promise I just want to help." He extended his hand slowly, the same way he did when trying to earn the trust of injured dogs he found on the streets, and waited patiently as the girl decided whether she could trust him. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the eerie feeling that this was no ordinary lost child. "My name is Emma," she finally whispered, her small voice almost lost in the noise of the city. "I've been looking for my mommy for a long time, but I can't find her anywhere." Tears streamed down her rosy cheeks as she told how she had been separated from her mother at the mall, tried to find her way home, but ended up completely lost once night fell. Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest, the same one he had when he saw orphaned children in Afghanistan. But there was something different about Emma, a maturity in her eyes that didn't match her age. He noticed she didn't cry like other children. There was a strange restraint in her, as if she had grown used to suppressing her emotions. "Emma is a beautiful name," Marcus said, taking off his jacket and placing it over the girl's shivering shoulders. "How about coming with me? I know a warm place where we can talk and maybe find something for you to eat." He saw her eyes light up at the mention of food, and his heart broke to realize how clearly undernourished she was. Emma hesitated only for a moment before accepting his outstretched hand, and Marcus felt a current surge through his body the moment their fingers touched. There was something special about this girl, something that triggered every one of his military instincts, yet awakened a paternal instinct he thought had died long ago. As they walked together down the empty streets, Marcus couldn't have imagined that Emma carried secrets that would not only transform his life, but reveal impossible connections that would challenge everything he believed about fate and second chances. The small makeshift shelter Marcus had built under the Roosevelt Street bridge had never felt more important than that night, as he watched Emma curl up against the cardboard boxes that served as walls. He had saved his last ham sandwich for breakfast, but seeing the hunger in the girl's eyes, he didn't hesitate for a second to split it in half and offer her the bigger portion. "I can't take your food," Emma murmured, though her voice betrayed the desperate hunger she felt, and Marcus could see she was trying to be polite even in the midst of despair. He gently insisted, watching her devour every bite as if it were the most precious meal in the world. In that moment, Marcus felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced since his days in the army. There was something magical in the way Emma ate, savoring every crumb with a gratitude that deeply touched the heart of the wounded veteran. Yet there was also an elegance in her mannerisms that seemed oddly out of place for a child of the streets. As Emma finished eating, Marcus noticed details his trained military mind couldn't ignore. Her nails were far too clean for someone who'd been lost for hours, her teeth perfect and well cared for, and there was a faint tan line on her wrist where a pricey watch had once clearly rested. "Emma, tell me more about your mommy," he asked gently, lighting a small candle he'd found in the trash to bring some warmth into the shelter. The girl looked into his eyes with a disturbing intensity and replied, "Mommy always said I was special, that one day important people would come looking for me." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, not just because of the strange words, but because of how Emma spoke them, with a wisdom that had no place in a 7-year-old. He held her small, delicate hand, promising to help her find her family, unaware that this promise would lead him to uncover truths that would shake the foundations of his own identity and reveal that fate had woven a far more intricate web than he could ever imagine. Dawn crept in under a thick fog that turned the streets of Chicago into a ghostly maze, and Marcus woke up to find Emma clinging to his arm, murmuring unintelligible words in a restless sleep. He watched her for a few minutes, noticing how even in sleep she held herself with an elegance that seemed rehearsed, and decided he couldn't wait any longer. He needed to find the child's parents before something terrible happened. "Emma, sweetheart, I need you to help me remember everything that happened yesterday," he said gently, waking her carefully. She opened her crystalline blue eyes, and for a moment seemed confused, unsure of where she was. Then her expression shifted into something Marcus couldn't decipher, a mix of relief and fear that deeply unsettled him. "Did you have nightmares?" he asked, and Emma responded only with a look carrying far more pain than any child should bear. Over the next few hours, Marcus and Emma walked through the freezing streets, visiting every place she could recall. The mall where she claimed she got lost, the plaza where she sometimes played, the school she attended. But with each location, the details of Emma's story subtly changed, as if she were trying to remember something that had been deliberately erased from her mind. Marcus began to notice inconsistencies. Emma said she lived in an apartment, yet described in detail the view from a large house with a garden. She claimed her mother worked in an office, but casually mentioned maids and chauffeurs. His military instinct screamed that something was wrong, but each time he looked at Emma's angelic face, he felt such a deep connection that he couldn't bring himself to doubt her. When they paused to rest on a park bench, Emma held his hand and said something that made Marcus's blood run cold. "Marcus, have you ever felt like you've known someone for a long time, even if you're just meeting them?" The question echoed in his mind like an alarm bell, because that's exactly what he had been feeling since the moment he saw her. An impossible familiarity that defied all logic. The silence following Emma's question was shattered by the deafening sound of a helicopter passing overhead, and Marcus instinctively threw his body over the girl, shielding her with his arms as war flashbacks exploded in his mind like bombs. His hands trembled uncontrollably, cold sweat dripping down his forehead as he relived the horrors of Afghanistan, the day his unit was ambushed, the moment he saw his best friend Tommy die in his arms, the explosion that left the scar on his face and fragments of metal in his chest that doctors never managed to remove. Emma remained still under his protection, but Marcus could feel her tiny heart pounding fast. When he finally regained control, he looked into her eyes and found an understanding there that terrified him. "You were in the war, weren't you?" she asked softly, her voice filled with an impossible wisdom. And Marcus wondered how a 7-year-old child could recognize the signs of combat trauma so clearly. "Yes, sweetheart, I was in the war," Marcus admitted, his voice hoarse with emotion, as he sat beside Emma on the cold bench. "I spent 2 years in Afghanistan thinking I was protecting innocent people like you, but when I came back, I realized the world I fought for had no place for me." He told her how the nightmares kept him from sleeping, how the sound of traffic threw him into panic, how he lost his job because he couldn't focus anymore, and how his wife Sarah eventually left him because she couldn't bear to watch him suffer. Emma listened to every word with an attention that bordered on the supernatural, and when he finished, she placed her little hand on the scar on his face and said, "You're a hero, Marcus, even if you don't believe it." There was something in the way she said his name that made his heart skip a beat, as if she knew far more about him than should be possible. When Marcus asked how a child so small could understand such complex things, Emma looked straight into his eyes and answered, "Some people are born knowing things, others take a lifetime to learn." And in that moment, Marcus became absolutely certain. This was no ordinary child, and fate had orchestrated their meeting for reasons he was still far from understanding. The hours passed like a strange dream, and Marcus found himself telling Emma stories he had never shared with anyone. Not even with Sarah during the best days of their marriage. He spoke of Tommy, his war buddy, who used to say that when he returned home, he would open a small bike shop and teach kids to ride on weekends, and how Marcus had promised his dying friend that he would live for the both of them. Emma listened to every word with such intensity that Marcus forgot he was talking to a child. When he mentioned that Tommy often dreamed about the daughter he'd never meet, a little girl beautiful like an angel, he saw a tear run down Emma's cheek. "Do you think your friend Tommy would be proud of you now?" she asked, and the question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut, because he knew the answer was no. Tommy would be disappointed to see the hero he admired reduced to a ghost living on the streets. But there was something in the way Emma asked that made Marcus feel like she wasn't just curious. She was testing something inside him, as if his answer mattered to a greater purpose. As the sun began to set once again, painting the sky over Chicago in shades of orange, Marcus realized he had spent nearly 24 hours with Emma, and still there was no sign of her parents. No missing child posters, no police sirens, no visible panic on the streets. He began to question Emma more directly, asking for her mother's full name, the exact address of her home, the phone number of a relative, but her answers were always vague and evasive, as if she were deliberately avoiding concrete information. "Emma, are you sure you're telling me the whole truth?" Marcus asked, and for the first time since they met, He saw real fear in her eyes. "Some truths are too dangerous to be told too soon," she replied, in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of massive secrets, and Marcus felt a chill crawl down his spine. At that moment, Emma gripped his hand with surprising strength for such a small child and said, "Marcus, promise me you won't abandon me, no matter what you find out about who I am." The question hung in the air like a dark omen, and Marcus felt he was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. But looking into her pleading blue eyes, he made a promise that would change his life forever. The truth struck like lightning in the middle of a storm, when Marcus woke in the dead of night and found Emma sitting in an oddly formal posture, her small hands holding a yellowed photograph he had never seen before. "Marcus," she said, in a voice that suddenly sounded older, more tired, "I need to tell you the truth about who I really am." He took the photo with trembling hands and felt the world collapse around him. It was a picture of Tommy, his fallen war companion, holding a newborn baby with the same crystal blue eyes now staring back at him. "My real name is Emma Thompson, and Tommy was my father," she continued, and each word stabbed Marcus in the chest. "I never had a mother to look for. I lied about that because I needed to be sure that you were still the man my dad told me about." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of Marcus's heart pounding so loudly he was sure Emma could hear it. "I ran away from the orphanage a week ago because I knew you were somewhere in this city," Emma continued, pulling a crumpled letter from her pocket, written in Tommy's familiar handwriting. "Dad always told me about you, how you saved his life 3 times, how you were the only man he'd trust to protect me. But I needed to know if the war hadn't broken that goodness inside you." Marcus read the letter with tears in his eyes, recognizing every word of his lost friend. "Marcus, if you're reading this, it means my little Emma needs you. She's the most precious thing I've ever had, and I know you'll protect her like you protected me. Keep your promise, brother." Emma looked him in the eye and confessed, "I made up the story about looking for my mother because I needed to see if you would help a child you didn't know, even when you had nothing to give. If you did, I'd know you were still the hero my father loved." In that moment, Marcus understood that he had been tested from the very first second, and that Emma had risked everything to find not just to protect her, but the exact man her father had chosen to guard her when no one else in the world even knew she existed. The revelation of Emma's true identity and the test she had set for him turned Marcus into a storm of conflicting emotions: admiration for the girl's intelligence and bravery, guilt for failing to keep his promise to Tommy sooner, and a paternal love so fierce it ached in his chest. He held Emma tightly against him, feeling like he was embracing a piece of his best friend, and for a moment let all the tears he had held in for the past 3 years flow freely down his war-scarred face. "You're just like your father," he whispered, recognizing the same fierce determination Tommy had in battle. "He would be so proud to see the brave young woman you're becoming." Emma smiled through her tears and confessed she had watched Marcus for days before approaching him, that she had seen him share his food with other homeless people, help injured animals, and still carry himself with a soldier's posture even in the midst of despair. The weight now on his shoulders was crushing. He wasn't just a homeless veteran trying to survive, but the chosen guardian of his best friend's daughter, a child who had lost everything and placed her last hope in him. Morning brought a cruel clarity to the impossible situation they faced. Marcus had no home, no job, not even identification to prove he could care for a child, and Emma was officially a missing minor who would be sent back into the system if the authorities found her. "I can't go back there," Emma begged, clutching Marcus's tattered coat. "At the orphanage, they treat me like a number, like a problem to fix. You're the only person in the world who truly knows me." Marcus knew that keeping Emma would be considered kidnapping in the eyes of the law, but he also knew that turning her in would betray the sacred trust Tommy had placed in him. He looked at the girl who had turned his life upside down in less than 48 hours and made a decision that would change everything. "Emma, your father made me promise, And I'm going to keep that promise, no matter the cost." At that moment, he couldn't have imagined that his words were being heard by someone who had been searching for them all morning, someone whose arrival would bring consequences neither of them was prepared to face. The sound of footsteps approaching made Marcus instinctively pull Emma behind him, his military instincts on full alert. But what happened next would surpass all of his fears and every expectation. The woman approaching was elegant and well-dressed, her grey hair tied back in a flawless bun and her eyes carrying a mix of determination and compassion that made Marcus instinctively lower his defenses. "You must be Marcus Thompson," she said in a soft yet firm voice, "and this must be Emma. You two were much harder to find than I expected." Marcus stepped protectively in front of Emma, ready to fight if necessary, but the woman raised her hands in peace and continued, "My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm the attorney responsible for executing Thomas Thompson's will." Time froze for a moment. Marcus knew Tommy never had money to leave behind. He could barely support himself before deploying. Sarah opened a leather folder and pulled out documents that made Marcus question everything he thought he knew about his best friend. "Thomas left very specific instructions about Emma and about you, Marcus, including a substantial trust fund he established before enlisting." Emma gripped Marcus's hand tightly, her blue eyes shining with a hope she hadn't dared feel in years, as Sarah explained that Tommy had inherited property from a distant uncle during his time in the army, an inheritance he had kept secret. "There's more," Sarah continued, her voice thick with emotion. "Thomas also left instructions stating that you, Marcus, are to be named Emma's legal guardian in the event of his death." She presented signed and notarized papers, documents Tommy had secretly prepared before his final mission, as if he knew he might not return. Marcus read each line with growing disbelief. His best friend had not only secured Emma's future, but had also made provisions to care for him, creating a fund for veteran treatment and a home where Marcus could live while raising Emma. "Thomas wrote a letter specifically for this moment," Sarah said, handing him a sealed envelope. "He asked that I only give it to you once you were both together." Marcus opened the letter with trembling hands and read the words that changed everything. "Marcus, brother, if you're reading this, it means my girl found you. I know you must feel lost, but I want you to know that you've always been the most honorable man I've ever known. Emma needs you, but you need her too. You'll save each other." Tears streamed down Marcus's face as he realized Tommy had orchestrated all of this, that even in death his best friend was still taking care of him, and that the brave little girl beside him was not just a responsibility, but a gift that would restore meaning to his broken life. 6 months later, Marcus woke in a real bed for the first time in years. Morning sunlight pouring through the window of the house Tommy had left for them, and found Emma in the kitchen, making pancakes with the focus of a seasoned chef. The transformation in both of them was remarkable. Marcus had regained weight, his beard was neatly trimmed, and his eyes no longer carried the haunting shadows that once followed him through the streets. Emma was blooming like a flower, finely rooted in fertile soil, her laughter echoing through the house and filling the empty spaces in Marcus's heart he thought would never be whole again. "Good morning, Daddy Marcus," she said, using the nickname she'd come up with on her own, a name that made his chest swell with pride every time he heard it. He looked at the girl who had saved his life just as much as he had saved hers, and understood that Tommy had known exactly what he was doing. Emma didn't just need a guardian, and Marcus didn't just need a purpose. They needed each other to become a real family. The therapy Marcus attended 3 times a week was helping with the nightmares, and seeing Emma happy and safe was the best medicine for his wounded soul. That afternoon, they visited the cemetery where Tommy was buried, as they did every week, and Marcus placed fresh flowers on the grave, while Emma told her father about her grades at her new school and the science project she was working on. "Daddy Tommy," Emma said, her voice full of gratitude, "thank you for choosing Marcus to take care of me. You were right, we really did save each other." Marcus placed a hand on the girl's shoulder and whispered a promise into the wind. Thank you, brother, for giving me a second chance to be the man you always believed I was." As they walked home, Emma suddenly stopped and looked up at Marcus with those blue eyes that now sparkled with joy instead of pain. "Do you think Daddy Tommy is proud of us?" she asked. Marcus smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "I'm sure he is, sweetheart. I'm sure he is." Udi, and as father and daughter walked hand in hand beneath the golden evening sky, Marcus knew that sometimes miracles come disguised as tragedy, that the greatest blessings often rise from the greatest losses, and that true love has the power to turn even the most shattered hearts into something whole and beautiful once again.